Hi, I'm Grady Collane, the CapeCod.com news center, joined today by a special guest here to talk about his new film, Great White Summer. Nick Budabin, you're a filmmaker and director. Do you mind telling us a little bit more about this documentary, this film that's talking a little bit more about the rising shark issue conversation that's been happening on the Cape and Islands as of late? Tell us a little bit more about what we can expect from this film.
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me. Great White Summer is a feature-length documentary about the impact of the increase in seal population and shark population on the Cape. We started filming shortly after the fatal shark attack in 2018. And the film really focuses on how the community is handling the issue and how they differ on ways to solve this issue. We found out pretty early on in our filming that there were very different opinions on how to tackle the issue. Some people want to just coexist with the sharks and the seals. Others want to have more surveillance and detection, things such as nets and buoys and drones. And others want to cull the seals to in turn reduce the shark population. And so our film really focuses on all of these different opinions and how the community sort of responded after the attack and the best path forward.
Now, that's a lot of time to be doing this. You guys have, I'm assuming there was some issues with COVID-19 as well, but ironically, with a 6 year kind of timeline, you guys have been able to see like quite a wide range of responses. I think in that time, there's also been a lot more tagging efforts done with Dr. Greg Scommel, whom also does feature in this documentary. Do you think that anything kind of like changed in you in the time period between the beginning of this and the end in terms of like maybe what you were looking for, what you were expecting when you first started this project?
Well, yeah, I mean, it always goes that way. I mean, that's the exciting part about making a documentary is that you really, especially the type of films that we make. When I say we, I mean myself, my partner, Matt Elkin, and our executive producers, David Joyella and Mark Lippman. We make verite films, and what that means is we're not going with an agenda in mind. We don't know what our sort of beginning, middle, and end is yet. We know where we're starting, but we don't know where it's going to end. So it's always a surprise to kind of and sort of a journey to see where you end up. So for me, I learned a lot. I mean, I knew early on that people were passionate about the issue. I didn't quite understand the connection to the ocean that the people who live here have, and exactly what it means to them to come out to the Cape, to move here for the ocean, to sort of be so close and almost one with the ocean, and then what it means to them when that's sort of taken away. So that was always interesting to see throughout the film. And then for me personally, I also just got a lot closer to the ocean. My relationship to the ocean evolved working on this film, both in terms of how I recreate in it. I've become an avid fisherman and paddleboarder since making the film, things I didn't do before I started making the film. And just a real appreciation for all the living things and sort of the balance between humans and, marine life that lives in the ocean.
hmm Yeah, it's very interesting. There's some amazing shots that are in this documentary as well. I have gotten the chance to see it, and there's a lot of up close footage with white sharks, in addition to some other footage that has been collected from the actual like on the research boats and up in the plains as well. So you definitely showcase the challenges that come with trying to coexist with the sharks, getting the tags out and stuff like that. Was that something you were already familiar with before, or were you also kind of taken aback when you first saw like the idea of like they have to harpoon the the sharks in order to get the tags in there and some of the process that goes through? Was that stuff a surprise to you? Is there some other kind of things that kind of jumped out at you that was like strange and unique in the regards of how we actually have to take care of these marine animals?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't aware of the process at all before making the film. Yeah, it's wild just just how close you have to get to these sharks to find them, to tag them, to track them, how long this process takes to sort of get a better sense of their patterns. And of course that's science, that's how it works. You have to observe, but it was just sort of interesting to see how the data is collected and just how the technology is also constantly evolving, right? So we may just be at the cusp of many breakthroughs in terms of getting more information and data about the patterns of the sharks, which will in turn potentially help human safety. So it's been really interesting to see that evolution over the last few years. I'd say the other thing that's surprising and interesting is just understanding that you really can't just go out on a boat and find a shark, you need a spotter plane, especially on Cape Cod. The water's so
Yes.
murky. So I think a lot of people from pop culture are used to seeing sharks in crystal clear waters and thinking that, or seeing a shark breach, seeing the fin and thinking that they sort of make contact that way, but they don't. They stay under the water. They very rarely breach. Um, and you need a plane basically to see them on Cape Cod. So I just think it's interesting to this idea that they're everywhere, they're all around us somewhere, but they don't make themselves known. And that's mostly because they don't want anything to do with us, frankly, I think.
Well, that is for the best, and hopefully it can remain that way as much as possible. But yeah, it is certainly that different, a big difference to like the Bahamas and stuff like that, where you're down able to see the crystal clear waters. It's that unseen issue that seems to kind of create such a paranoia. Like if it could see him coming, then do you think maybe things would be a bit different? Do you think that's some of it really is just that invisible threat that you see like throughout this that kind of creates that fear that's maybe different than it would be in say like the Caribbean or whatnot?
I think absolutely. I mean, I don't know if that is. I don't know if seeing the sharks is better
I know
for the
I don't
psyche.
necessarily know I would be happy about seeing it coming, but
Well, what I do think though is that in terms of how we process it
Mhm.
psychologically versus other risks that are greater or even equal. For example, I think that we know that if you go camping, a bear might attack you
Sure.
potentially, right? But this idea that you can see the animal coming makes us feel a bit calmer, I think, about the whole thing and less concerned. I mean, certainly we might still be concerned about bears, but I think that we'd still willing to go into the woods, for example, even though there might be bears in them, whereas some people just might not be comfortable going in the water, knowing that there might be sharks in there, specifically because of this idea that, as you said, you can't see it coming. So there is such vulnerability there, I think, and it impacts the human psyche in a way that other threats might not. And that's of course also true with things like driving your car, which is of course much more dangerous in every possible way, right? In terms of car accidents and those risks of then just jump going in the water, even if there are a lot of sharks.
hmm Now you let's see here. You've been doing a lot of research and as well you've been doing this documentary. It's filmmaking and that does bring to mind some other films that have starred some famous sharks, namely Jaws. I mean, that's kind of what kind of started this whole cultural zeitgeist of fearing sharks. That was filmed here in Cape and Islands region. Takes place well, it doesn't take it takes place in a fictional reality, but it's filmed such you can go and see all the places that it was filmed here on Cape Cod, and this is well before the sharks were a major issue. How do you feel with like that cultural impact? Like, was that kind of something that was in, what's your relationship with like Jaws and some of the other pop culture ideas of sharks as you're making your film about this? Are you like finding that even every shot that you have has this like extra layer to it because you're worried someone might be bringing 20-year-old baggage from something that they saw from Spielberg a while back? Like, how does that kind of play into your role as the filmmaker and the director and the editor as well?
Well, it really plays into initially how we choose the subject. So, when we looked at making this film, we felt that there had not been a documentary or any film at all, really, about how a shark attack impacts a community and how a community deals with, a fatal attack and how to, what is the path forward there. So, I think for us, we look, when we talk about Jaws and we talk about all the other pop culture shark films, we think about what's our lane? How can we create something unique that hasn't been done before that will fit into the shark genre, but create its own lane? And so when we think about Jaws, right, essentially the first 45 minutes or so of Jaws is all takes place on land. So before they go out in the boat, right, and they look for the shark, it's really just the people in town, the police, the municipalities trying to figure out how do we deal with this threat. And that is what we sort of felt like was missing in terms of a documentary. There had never been a documentary like this one that really explored that sort of same thing that the first 45 minutes of Jaws does. So we felt like we were bringing something new to the genre. And at the same time, I guess paying homage to what Jaws had done, about 50 years earlier. So it is in our mind, Frankie, it is, it is in our mind when we're making it, but mostly no, Frankie. So it is in our minds, but mostly in the sense that we're trying to create a new lane
Mhm.
with our film.
It's really interesting. It is I've been known to be a horror buff myself, and while Jaws doesn't really build that way, but yeah, the first 45 minutes is socioeconomics. And that's something that definitely is interesting to see kind of as now here we are. It's quite a few decades later, but it is interesting to see that kind of come back around again. Now, as well, of course, this is kind of all spurred on by the unfortunate death of Arthur Medici, who was surfing in Wellfleet when he was bitten by a shark, and that unfortunately led to his death. And that is one of the few fatal shark interactions that has happened in this region in a long time and since, really. But how do you go about like doing this film in a way that I presume not trying to exploit or anything like that. Like there's a lot of like I'm assuming best practices when it comes to how you handle that as a filmmaker. Do you mind just elaborating for us what goes through your mind?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. So, I think we want to stand out from the media. We're not coming in, and when I say the media, I all respect for the media, but
You can throw
with
me
the
under the bus. I understand. It's okay.
well, everyone's got a job to do, but in terms of the shark issue in particular, I think it's a very sensational topic. It gets a lot of it's a clickbaity topic. So after attacks or after deaths, journalists will come in and they'll do stories, and then they're done. They're on to the next story, and it's almost a swarm to an extent. To cover this topic, right? And so for us, we approach it very differently. We reach out to people on the phone first, and we have long conversations to get to know them and understand their perspective on the issue, and introduce ourselves and answer questions they may have. And that's before we start filming. And then when we do start filming, there's only two of us. It's a very small crew, so we're not coming in with a ton of people. We really want to create an environment that's comfortable for the people we're filming so that they can really almost forget that we're there and just sort of behave as they normally would. But I think most importantly, we come back and we check in and we let people know that we're not here to exploit them. And I think they feel that because they understand that we're making a film that will give them the opportunity to tell their full story, not just do one interview and then select the soundbite and move on. So it's that communication, it's that consistency that I think creates a dynamic where the subjects are really comfortable with us telling their story, and it creates trust, right? Which is really the most important element to a documentary, in order to get people to behave naturally and tell you their truthful story.
hmm Yeah, there was a lot of shots that involved being inside of people's homes. I know that there's quite a few of someone getting ready to go out and go surfing as their kids are getting they're suited up in their pump house, wetsuits or dry suits. I can never really quite tell the difference. But at any rate, there's yeah, it's definitely shot from a lot of inside perspective, a lot more than perhaps I was even expecting when I first started watching it myself. It's very personal. You're literally in people's living rooms. So I was interested to see kind of like how we're able to build our relationship and follow through. Were there some people that you were able to reach out to for when the film was finished, where you're like, look, there's you. Like, is that kind of fun for you to kind of be able to follow up with these people after the fact too?
Absolutely, yeah. Because as you mentioned early on, I mean, it took us over 5 years to finish the film, and you touch base with people, you let them know how things are going. But I think everybody sort of until they see the finished product is like, okay, we'll see it when it's done. Some people are skeptical. It's hard for them to sort of because they're not there for all the filming either, right?
Sure.
They're only there for the things that they're filmed, and then we're filming a bunch of other characters, so they don't really see the full picture. So for us, it's extremely fun to be able to show them what we've been working on and see the result of all the work. And again, especially because there is so much trust and time on their part that they give to us to create this film that they don't see anything throughout the process. We're not like showing them clips as we're editing or anything. We're just checking in and telling them this is happening. Trust us, it's happening. But we need a little bit more. We need a little bit more. And then we ask a lot of them. So for them and for us to be able to watch the film together, especially in the theater with an audience, is a really an exciting moment for the film.
Yeah, as well. So a lot of this, I mean, this is in the description as well, but we wanted to talk a little bit about the upcoming premiere dates. You've already had one premiere, which apparently has gone so well that we're going to be back for second soon. And it's also going to be available for streaming on September 3rd. And then this is kind of like the broad reveal. But do you mind telling us a little bit more about those live in-person events that have already been happening and what's upcoming soon? Kind of like what was your response finally being able to get it in front of an audience? And are you excited about being able to get a second opportunity to show it even again?
Yeah, so this is, the films has so many lives, right? It's the beginning when you're starting to make it, and then it's the whole journey of creating the film and editing the film, and then there's this part where we get to bring it out into the world and show people, and that's really probably the best part. So We premiered at the International Ocean Film Festival, which is in San Francisco. And that was a really great event with a great crowd who really was passionate about the subject matter. You know, they have their own shark population out there, and we got to speak to some scientists out there and just screen for an audience that is really interested in the topic. So that was wonderful. And then we just had our Cape Cod premiere last week on the 19th of August at Cape Cinema in Dennis to a sold out crowd. So that was wonderful. We did a Q&A afterward with members of the cast. We have since that sold out, we're going to be doing a screening this coming Sunday at Cape Cinema, September 1st at 7 p.m. Then we have another screening coming up in Nantucket on September 4th, and then another screening coming up in New York, in Brooklyn, where I'm based, on September 5th. In addition to that, the film will be released on streaming platforms on September 3rd, on Amazon and iTunes, and you can pre-order it now on iTunes. So we're hoping to continue to do more screenings. You know, we'd love to have more screenings on the Cape and throughout New England, not only this summer, but in upcoming summers, because obviously this is an issue that is, you know, consistently coming around, especially in the summers. And I think every summer it's sort of the whole cycle starts again, right? With shark sightings and tags and pings and beach closures and this sort of thing. And so part of the goal of the film is not only to be relevant in this moment, but to continue to be a film that people can watch and connect with the subject matter, and also you know, get some perspective on how to handle this situation should it, you know, unfortunately arise again. So for us, it really is a lot of fun to be able to release it to an audience, especially to have a question and answer period to talk to the people who watch the film and answer questions and talk about the process, and give them an opportunity also to talk to cast members of the film and hear about their experience as well. So it's been great.
Yeah, it's interesting, and you kind of touched on it already. The idea of like might not be the last time that we have an issue with Arthur Medici's kind of a similar case of an unfortunate shark attack or a shark bite. It's not like the sharks come after humans on purpose. But yeah, I remember they were discussing like a memorial beach in the town afterwards, and they're like, "Well, should we leave space for potentially more victims? Like, is that something that because this is just gonna because expressing the concern, like you know, that was specifically like." Yeah, is this something that we're going to have to routinely be aware of unless we're going to have some kind of like proactive way to detect sharks, which is almost impossible because you have to tag every shark in the ocean. But like, what are the ways you do touch on in the documentary ways that people are trying to consider like a shark warning system. It's very interesting. So yeah, it's just definitely like a sobering thought to think like you know, unfortunately, opportunity for a sequel if there were to be another incident to happen on Cape Cod and one of those other beaches. Do you? I also want to ask a little bit more about like the filmmaking process itself as well. How much is the documentary on site versus in the editing room? Like, does it really only come together once you're like getting all the different film, and it's really up until then that you're just kind of like trying to collect as much as you can, or do you have a rough idea of what the story, quote unquote, should be as you're making it? Can you just talk a little bit more about how that goes?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of it starts in the casting. So early on, you know, we have a good sense of the types of people that we want to talk to, that we think have stakes involved in the subject matter, and also are coming at it from different perspectives. And that was especially important for this film. So initially, we know, okay, we want to film with people in the science community, people in the grassroots community, people who are surfers, people who are parents of surfers, just sort of hitting on different people in the community who you know, have something at stake with this issue. So we know that, and then as we get to know them, we're trying to figure out what is their arc, where are they now, and where do they want to end up, or where might they end up in a year from now, roughly. So we're trying to tell a story where, as a viewer, where you end is somewhere different from where you begin. So throughout the process of making the film, we're sort of taking a look at our footage, checking in on the journey of our cast, and seeing, you know, what else do we need to film to continue to tell that story. That said, you know, we're certainly overshooting and shooting more than ultimately makes it into the edit. So a big part of the most of the filming was done in that first year after the fatal attack, because that was when the tensions were the highest, and you know, people were really looking for some immediate answers, and there's a lot of urgency to the subject. So at that point, we did the most. The next couple of years, we were mostly in the edit, and you might be in the edit, and you might say, okay, we've got them talking about this thing, but we don't have a shot of them doing the thing they're talking about. So we might go back and shoot a little bit of that. But we sort of have the luxury of time in making this film, and it's a bad thing because you sort of want to sell the film early and get it out into the world as soon as possible. But the benefit is perspective, right? And I think as an artist in any medium, perspective is huge because you're able to sort of look at your work throughout the process and just make it better, just refine it, get rid of the extra layers, bring in some new elements that make it sing. And so our creative process is really to have a sense of the story we want to tell. We'll see how it plays out, and then continue to refine as we go on with given that perspective that we have.
Hmm. All right, awesome. Now, as well as a fellow content creator, I think of having multiple years to work on the one project, and almost sounds like a blessing because it's like, oh, I can just chop and do whatever I need to. But I assume there might have been a few gray hairs involved in filming around COVID-19. Do you mind kind of highlighting some of the challenges that was coming around with that during that time? I assume that probably was quite an issue right there in the middle of the project process. So yeah, can you just kind of highlight for us some of the issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think it well, one thing it did that was not an issue, but sort of an interesting byproduct of it was that there was a lot people were concerned about the housing market here after the shark attack and the vacation market, the rental market, and basically that we had people talking about, okay,
Oh,
there's that these the influx of sharks and the fatal attack is going to impact people wanting to come on the Cape. Now, I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying that was a concern in 2018 and 2019, and then COVID changed that, right? Everybody came out to the Cape because they all started living on their vacation homes, and so it was interesting in that sense as we were telling this story because you'll never know now, right? At this point, whether the sharks would have actually impacted the rentals or because
true.
so in that regard, that was interesting. In terms of the filming, I mean, it certainly slowed things down, but the truth is, we weren't looking to film for 5 years straight. We were mostly looking to film for a year straight after the attack, do a little bit of filming to fill in some gaps. And that was really what we did. So we got most of our story before 2020.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and so, it if anything, it allowed us to take a breath, look at our footage, and come back. So I don't think that we were really impacted by COVID. And I think if you look at the film, one of the things you'll notice is there's no reference of COVID. There are no masks in the film, and that was because most of the filming was done on 2019, and anything else we really didn't want to bring COVID into
Sure.
the film. Now, one of the things I will say lastly is that it was interesting to watch COVID play out and to see people sort of do their own research and be wary of scientists, and just sort of want an answer quickly to solve this pandemic crisis. Exact same things we were seeing on the Cape as it related to the shark crisis. Distrust of science. We're going to do our own research. We need answers now. And so it's just interesting to see the parallels there in terms of how human beings deal with science and wrap their head around the time it takes for science to do its own job and to collect data. So we thought that was interesting. And we think that when people watch the film, even though we don't mention COVID, you're just watching sharks, it really will, they'll find those parallels themselves in what we've been seeing play out the last few years.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Now, once again, that the unseen threat and how that kind of impacts the human psyche. The We're about coming up on time, but I wanted to ask a little bit more about like what are some of your goals with this film? If someone comes and watches this documentary and they come away with like one major idea or like one new thing that wasn't in their brain before, what would you hope that would be, in terms of message or an idea or just something they might have not thought about before? What would be your hope if you have one?
That's a great question. I mean, I think there's a couple. I mean, it's hard to nail down to one, but I'll give you a couple. A
It's
couple.
very
Um,
reductory question. I know, I know that's the issue,
I mean,
but
one is I hope they're entertained. I think we try to
sure.
make films that are entertaining. I think a lot of documentaries throw a lot of information at you, and we try to make films that you fall in love with the characters or you're interested in the characters and you
Sure.
you want to watch their stories unfold. So I think it's entertaining. I want people to see the beauty of Cape Cod because it is such a wonderful place with or without sharks. Um, and I really want people to understand that when we deal with these environmental issues, that there's always going to be science involved and there's always going to be human emotion involved, whatever those things are. whether it's COVID, whether it's fires, whether it's dealing with influx of animals, whether that might be deer or sharks or whatever it is, and we have to come at it from a place of understanding on both sides. So I think what the film is really illustrating is a dialogue, and a relatively respectful dialogue. And so I think when the film, I hope, can be used both as an entertainment value, but also for people who might come up against this issue, specifically sharks, Australia,
Yes.
California, Florida, now New York, certainly New England, and watch the film as a reference point to say, okay, this is a community that dealt with this issue firsthand. And the film, I think, is a record of that and how it was handled both well and poorly, and people can use it to kind of make their own decisions and learn a little bit. But it doesn't have to be just sharks. I think it's relevant for all sorts of environmental issues and how human beings deal with those issues. So I think that's really what we're looking for people to take away.
All right, awesome. Now, Nick, one last question as well. Do you think after the documentary that you've made, would you go swimming on Cape Cod? Would you go surfing, or is that, or do you now have a newfound like would you be okay with the risks, quote unquote? Like what was
Yeah,
your
so
thought?
it's a so I will absolutely go in the ocean. We were in the ocean a couple times this week, not only me, but my children, my nieces and nephews, and we go, basically we boogie board and we swim, but we're very in the shallow end of the ocean, but we're quite comfortable there. And we see seals 20, 30 yards out. We don't go swim up to them, of course, but we understand that they're there. And we know that that doesn't mean a shark's going to come right up to the shore where we are. So I am very comfortable swimming in the ocean. That said, prior to doing this, I was not, someone who would take long swims in the ocean on Cape Cod. I was also not someone who was surfing or paddleboarding
Mhm.
on the ocean side. So I that hasn't been taken away from me in a way where I feel the need to go out and do it again. And I'm not doing that stuff now. I don't. It's not worth the risk for me to go super deep out into the ocean and have my limbs hanging in there. I'm not comfortable with it. I know plenty of people who are, but it's not for me. But I absolutely go in the ocean. I'm not somebody who's just going to avoid the ocean on the Cape altogether. And it's a beautiful ocean and it's wonderful. And look, it's 2024. There have been no attacks since 2018, right? So you have to keep that in mind when you think about the risk. The sharks are there, but there have not been attacks in 6 years, so that's a long time.
Yeah, I guess that shark smart stuff from Atlanta White Shark Conservancy, Cape Cod National Seashore is definitely doing its benefit. All right, Nick. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. I do appreciate it. Any last final words you want to add for our listeners while I still have you? Plug the dates one more time for when streaming's available and when we can see it in person.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a screening this Sunday at Cape Cinema at 7 p.m. This is Sunday, August 1st at Cape Cinema. There is another screening Wednesday, September 4th on Nantucket. And then if anyone's going to be in New York, we have a screening on September 5th. All of this is on our website, greatwhitesummer.com. You can also follow us on Instagram at greatwhitesummer. And we are streaming September 3rd on Amazon Prime and iTunes. Please check out the film, especially if you're a Cape Codder or a New Englander. We really think you're going to love it, and it's really going to resonate with you. And leave a review, send us a message, let us know what you think. But yeah, we're really, really honored to have the film out, and we're just big fans of Cape Cod, so we really hope everybody comes out and supports.
All right, awesome, Nick. As well, in the description for this video, for this episode up on CapeCod.com, we'll also have those links for people who just want to click through. But yeah, thank you again. And thank you, our listeners, for enjoying this segment with Nick Budabin. I'm Grady Collane in the CapeCod.com News Center.